Welcome back, everybody, to episode one of the BroxtenDigital show. Super excited to be here. We're finally kicking off episode one. It's definitely taken a little bit longer than I've wanted to get this show up and off the ground, but here we are. And I'm probably even more excited for our guest that we've been able to get for episode one. Here with me, I'm joined by Andrew Prince. He's a senior SEO manager at Rocket and Redfin, but I'll let him do a little bit more of the self introduction there. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Broxton. Congrats on episode one, taking that big first step. So, I'm Andrew Prince, like you said, at Rocket and Redfin, working on the various Rocket companies' websites. But I've been in SEO for 8 years. I have experience at Wayfair. I built sort of the SEO program at a personal injury law firm. I've been at some agencies and taking it back all the way to how we met Broxton. I was a student at Michigan State University and spoke in one of your classes. And so, I like following your career path and the things that you've done and how you've used different skills and networking opportunities to be able to lead to this podcast. So go green and big fan of SEO. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, heck yeah, happy to have you here. Go White as well. Huge Spartan representation within this show and a lot of my personal branding stuff. So be ready, to hear a lot of that. But yeah, a lot of experience there in the SEO world. You've kind of seen it all with the different agency in-house. I know you have some freelance experience as well. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But what I really wanted to jump into now that the crowd kind of has an idea of who you are and the experience that you've had is really just something a little more recent that you've got to work on is I know Rocket just had a killer Super Bowl ad this past Super Bowl just recently here. I know it was everywhere, all over social media. As I've seen a lot of different backstage recordings and things like that, but you actually kind of got to play a pretty close role to that. So would love to kind of hear, what you have to share around that and just kind of the coolness and what it's like to kind of be a part of a Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, I graduated with my advertising management and media degree from Communication Arts and Sciences at Michigan State. And so I know a lot of my assignments were dissecting Super Bowl commercials and what was their potential audience, what was their message they were getting across. So to actually be on the professional side of it and be closer to campaigns, it's certainly cool to sit in the seat. So we had Lady Gaga singing Mr. Rogers' "Won't You Be My Neighbor," which was just a really great rendition of it, and then a really heartfelt, neighborly ad. And I was fortunate enough to be able to look at the YouTube video a little bit. I have some YouTube optimization in my career, so I was asked, "Hey, is there any way that this could show up better in Google or in YouTube?" So that was cool. And then last year, I was really, really close with some of the Super Bowl related things. I was actually in the office working for Rocket at the time because we purchased Rocket.com, and I was sort of the lead SEO on that project. And that was our big unveiling in our Super Bowl commercial last year. And so I had a lot of work leading up to that campaign. So a little less of a touch this year, but I was asked too, what type of branding should we put on here as far as what website we want people to go to, some YouTube optimization, and then last year prepping Rocket.com. So not things I necessarily learned in school, not things that were on my radar, but to be able to touch Super Bowl commercials or watch it and be like, hey, I had a part in some of that. It's certainly really cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's super awesome. It just really goes to show the kind of opportunities that present themselves when you really put yourself out there and jump into an industry like advertising and marketing. You know, I know you kind of come from maybe a not so typical marketing background as well, and we're able to kind of build up to this point in your career, which is super awesome. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. But I really wanted to start off with a cool story, get that Super Bowl out of the way. I know everybody's been buzzing a lot about that. I'm sure wanted to hear, a little bit of the inside scoop there. But I know you did mention kind of the merger of Rocket.com and having maybe even a little bit more of a lead role there. So really wanted to next just jump into that and go a little bit more in depth about more so all the different aspects that go into that. Obviously you're working with a huge team. As you kind of mentioned before, it was originally an aerospace engineering website, a lot of different aspects, and you had your hands in a lot of different pots to kind of manage and lead that effort. So I'd love to just kind of hear your story there, what role you played, and then really just how you were able to succeed. And obviously now you can search rocket.com. It was a successful merger.
Yeah, based on publicly available things online, I believe we purchased it somewhere around $14 million. So Rocket.com was the fourth largest purchase of a domain name in internet history. So one word domain names, early 2000s were kind of all bought up. So, aerospace engineering company had it, and so it costs a lot to be able to get it, but we figured we have Rocket Mortgage, Rocket Loans, Rocket Money, Rocket Events. We used to have Rocket Auto, Rocket Solar, Rocket Mortgage Canada, right? So many different rockets, and figured having Rocket.com was a great way to be able to showcase our brand. And when we bought it, we were told that we had about 100 days leading into our Super Bowl commercial in 2025 to launch a website that brought over Rocket Homes over to it and then some of what was on Rocket Mortgage. And so we had to move a couple million URLs to rocket.com. And the objective was rank for a term like rocket, which Elon Musk is just blowing up rockets all the time with SpaceX. And around that time leading into the Super Bowl, we had Katy Perry going up in space. So rocket sort of takes on that rocket ship aerospace meaning. And so a lot of my work was how do we get Google and other search engines to gain an understanding that when people search for rocket, it should mean like rocket companies and Rocket Mortgage and all the various brands within it. So certainly a very tough mission, especially since Rocket had been associated with aerospace for a long time. But as an SEO, to be able to work on a project of that size and leading towards the Super Bowl, certainly a big opportunity. So we actually had like a separate little war room where engineers and designers and various folks who worked on the website were, and I was able to be in there and gain buy-in that we needed SEO sign-off on all the various page templates to ensure that Rocket.com would be set up for the best chance of success. So there were a lot of very senior leaders in the organization that worked on this project. So it was certainly a win to have SEO a seat at the table. But when you're working with a multi-million page website, SEO does tend to be one of, if not the biggest, traffic drivers. So, even though we were on a very short timeline, being able to set up the standards for success were critical to be able to have it do well. And spoiler alert, it was a successful Super Bowl campaign. Within a minute of our Super Bowl commercial, we ranked number one for the term rocket. So that was really exciting. But a few months later, the company acquired Redfin, and that sort of replaced some of what used to be Rocket Homes and what made up Rocket.com. So it's kind of wild that I spent a few months of my life working on Rocket.com leading up to the Super Bowl, and then just a few months later, Rocket purchased Redfin. And so I work in-house, and a lot of people think that in-house is boring or you're working on the same websites or same projects for a long duration. But I've found certainly at Rocket, and I experienced it at Wayfair too, there's always big things going on, big campaigns, big website projects and moves and rebranding. And so that was certainly one of the big highlights of my career was working on that huge acquisition of Rocket.com and transitioning it from aerospace to home search and mortgage lending in time for a Super Bowl ad. It's kind of weird when, it's just my work, that's my job, but taking a step back and thinking about when I was a student, if you said I would be able to work on a project like this someday, I would have been ecstatic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what a cool couple of projects to work on. Just, I know you have a ton of experience beyond those two, but these last two we've talked about are just some amazing projects that, yeah, I mean, I'm just pretty fresh out of school and just really getting into my career. And I can't even imagine what I'm going to be able to work on. And that kind of seems like, maybe one of my big dreams is to work on a Super Bowl ad one day. So, that's awesome to see. You really can go out there and achieve those goals that you set out. But I just wanted to ask you this based on your last, kind of walking through the Rocket.com initiative. You're dealing with that super tight deadline. You're also dealing with a huge team. Obviously, I'm sure trying to vouch for yourself a little bit and make sure you're getting those SEO sign-offs on different things that you mentioned. I get this question from students quite a bit, but I don't know if you would experience any type of imposter syndrome or maybe asking yourself, am I the right person here? If you were, how were you kind of able to deal with that and move past it?
Yeah, it's difficult not to face that sometimes, especially when you're making multi-million dollar decisions in some cases of what if I mess up? What I have found in my career is I've learned way more when I've made mistakes than when I've had successes. If I look at the various things that I've learned in my career, it's when I've messed up and then learned from those. The worst thing you could do is make a mistake and then not learn from it or run away from it or hide it. So one of the ways I combat imposter syndrome is saying that one of my goals is failure. If I'm not failing constantly, then I'm not pushing the boundaries hard enough. I'm not pushing myself and my skill sets far enough. And so if you have a mindset of it's okay to fail as long as you fail fast and you learn, that helps with some of the imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough. It's like, well, if I fail and I learn at faster rates than other people, then my learning curve is going to be faster. I'm going to, grow at a quicker pace. I also, on a timeline like that, you don't really have time to have imposter syndrome. You don't have time to sit there and overthink things. You have to just go with your gut and say, hey, this is what I think is best and trust your experience and what you know. And if you don't have an answer for something, ask other people. And you have Google, now you have things like ChatGPT, you have other people in the industry. I ask friends all the time who work for other companies, hey, have you experienced this before? I haven't, or I'm not fully confident about it. What would you do in this scenario? So, understanding with imposter syndrome, one, it's okay to fail, and two, use the resources around you to learn and grow your knowledge so that you are as well informed as you can to make the best decision. The thing about SEO though is it's not black and white. It's not always like you win or you lose. It's a spectrum. So sometimes you're going to have better outcomes than others. The big thing is if it doesn't go according to plan, what did you learn from it? The worst thing you can do is not act or pawn it off on someone else or make excuses. So the best way to encounter imposter syndrome is use other resources and know it's okay to fail.
Yeah, 100%. Those are like two great takeaways, and I've definitely found myself being able to combat imposter syndrome using that. I know myself, I've learned a lot more from when I've failed in my short career so far than when I've, had success. So moving forward, we've went through, a couple of your really big, more recent projects you've worked on, but I did kind of want to dive into more of your SEO experience throughout your career, maybe some different achievements and things you've seen and witnessed that might be a little bit valuable. So just to kind of get started, would love for you to just kind of walk through maybe a little bit more of your early career experience as well as some achievements. And I know you're a big public speaker too, so I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, I love this stuff, and it's funny because people say that you don't choose SEO, SEO chooses you. So I started off at an agency where I didn't even really know what SEO was. And I learned email and paid search and paid social and a lot of different digital marketing channels, but didn't really know much about SEO. And we had a new VP of SEO, of marketing, excuse me, who came in and based on tenure said, what channel do you want to work on? What do you want to work on? What do you want to work on? I was the newest person and they said, sorry, you don't really get a choice. You're getting SEO. So I'm a bit of a self-taught SEO in that way, and that I didn't have too many people around me at the agency I was at that time where I could learn hands-on a lot of different things. So I attended meetups. Fortunately enough, I was in Raleigh, which is probably top 5 in the US for SEO and various community meetups. And so I went and just sat there and listened at first. I didn't talk to anyone, I didn't network in any way. I showed up. As soon as a speaker would go on, I'd listen and then I would leave immediately. And so it took me a little while to warm up to what is networking? How do I meet other people? What does that look like? But, you know, to be able to build confidence, I've launched probably 50 websites in my career. So that's certainly something to ask other people about and talk through of, hey, I'm launching this website. How do I do redirects? Or how do I name URLs and various pages? Uh, Building a program at the law firm after I got recruited there was probably the biggest confidence boost that I've had in my career. The second day of my job, I asked my boss, all right, what do you want me to work on first? And he said, we haven't really had an SEO. We want you to come in, you tell us what we need, you lay out the roadmap, you tell us what resources you need. And so second day on the job had a completely empty calendar, and I was able to build a program from scratch. I was only about 3 years into my career at that point, and so it was a bit intimidating, but I had the skills, I had some of the experience from the rapid growth and learning being at agencies first, that when I went in-house at the law firm, I felt like I had the confidence and some of the SEO knowledge to make it work. But probably the biggest ask I had to make of a leader in my career is I went up to my boss and I said, for the next 6 to 12 months, I do not want any of our authors, our content writers, to write new content on our website. So the law firm had a few thousand pages, but they were all very outdated or short or just not the type of content that would work well in Google. And so I had a ruthless way of cutting the website so that things that wouldn't perform were removed completely so they wouldn't weigh down the site. And then I looked at the writers and I educated them more about SEO, but then I had them go back to all of the content that existed and had them structure things in certain ways, rewrite things, do some keyword research, some different things to be able to optimize the existing content on the site. And within 12 to 18 months, we 6 times the amount of traffic going to the website with about half of as many pages as when I started there. So taking that giant leap to be able to build something is certainly a way to accelerate growth. I do think a lot of people earlier in their careers, especially a few years in, will go to startups. And that's a great way to touch a lot of different things, wear different hats, and really grow. So I think that was sort of my law firm experience. And then I went to Wayfair, where that at the time I was there was probably known as like a top 5 reputation for SEO of any site in the US. If you went to any SEO conference from 2016 to 2022, probably half of the talks would use Wayfair as some sort of example. So I learned a lot of how to critically think. I learned how to write SQL queries to access large databases. I also learned how to face layoffs and diversity in a corporate world, which was certainly tough. But that experience in working at Wayfair is what allowed me to have maybe a bigger name in the community, so to speak. And it opened some doors for me where I was able to start getting some speaking gigs. And so I have done some public speaking, whether it's a local American Marketing Association conference, a half day conference where I spoke about accessibility and people with disabilities and how SEO and accessibility for websites can go hand in hand. I spoke at Brighton SEO in San Diego about competitive research and looking at changes on websites over time to understand how it may impact your site based on what competitors are doing and how they show up in search engines. And then at SEO Week, which the agency iPullRank and Mike King put on out in New York, I did get to share the case study of 100 days to launch Rocket.com and prep it for a Super Bowl. So I know a lot of people like to niche down and be like the local SEO or the technical SEO. I really am a bit of a generalist working at a law firm that's sort of lead gen on a local scale. Wayfair is enterprise e-commerce, and now I'm sort of at an enterprise lead generation company with Rocket Mortgage. So a lot of different experiences early in my career in that first decade now that I believe will open a lot of doors in the future as far as what direction I want to look to go. So, yeah, a lot of really exciting things. But, I did an extra semester of college. I was an assistant store manager at Target right out of college and did that for about 7 months and fell on my face and completely failed and quit that because it wasn't for me. And then I was unemployed for 6 months and couldn't find a job. So about a year and a half after what most of my high school graduating class had started their career, I was going to North Carolina to be an intern at an agency and felt like I was so far behind my peers. So I'm sitting here now, 8 years into my digital marketing career. And like you said, I'm speaking on stages. I work for big companies working on big projects and what have you. But those first couple of years out of college, I felt so far behind from everybody else around me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that last statement you made there just goes to show, I say this a lot to students, is that everybody's on their own unique journey. It's easy to compare yourself, and there's always going to be people ahead of you and maybe achieving what you're looking to achieve. But comparison's just gonna make that worse and make you achieve a lot slower, in my opinion. So, I mean, that's just 100% proof right there that you shouldn't compare and really just focus on what you're doing and the inputs that you're seeing success with. I know in that you mentioned the transition from agency to working in-house. I know you kind of said like the agency prepared you with a toolkit. Obviously, you were able to work on your skills and probably see a lot more at a larger scale. So I know a lot of other of the young pros that might be listening to this are kind of probably in a similar position. You do your couple years at the agency, and then I know you mentioned startups as well. You start thinking, hey, where am I going to fit in? Where am I going to go to for this second part of my career? Would love to just hear kind of your take and maybe any advice you have on making that transition from agency to in-house.
Yeah, I feel like if you write out a blueprint of an ideal career path, mine certainly fits it almost exactly. I believe it was Nick Leroy who runs SEOjobs.com who had a LinkedIn post the other day about if he could redo his career again, what would it look like? And mine's almost fit it to a T. And so my first couple of roles were at agencies. And I learned so much because I was working on a lot of different clients at a time. So I got to learn about what it's like to present to different clients, different projects, different content management systems, and how websites work. I worked with different people internally at the agency based on client scopes and what their needs were. So I recommend that young professionals start at agencies just because you're exposed to a lot more and you develop a wider range of skills in a shorter period of time. The big difference transitioning from agency to in-house is what the main goal of the business is. I hate to say this, but the goal of an agency is not to succeed for their clients, it's to make their clients happy. That might be a little controversial, but you want your clients to continue to pay the bills, their retainers or project fees, and stay on. And sometimes I've worked on clients where their cousin Bill, he took an online class and all of a sudden he knows SEO, and so they're going to transition over to them, and you might have doubled their leads in the last year, but they have some sort of connection there. I've also had clients that maybe the results weren't there, but the cost of switching was high, or they liked the people they worked with. So with agencies, it really is about the relationships. Of course, the relationship tends to be better when you do get results, so that certainly helps, but agencies tend to be more about relationship building and how you communicate the story of performance and the actions you're taking. In-house is about the results. So the story that you're telling, relationships, making people happy, does that help? Sure. But the business needs to make money transparently, like flat out. You could have everyone around you be happy, but if you're at a publicly traded company like a Rocket Mortgage or Rocket Companies or a Wayfair, if your shareholders aren't happy, the business isn't making profitable scale, then people unfortunately lose their jobs. I've been through several rounds of layoffs at a couple companies now, and it's really unfortunate. And no amount of relationship building and making people happy would necessarily get you there. Your channel and the things you're responsible for need to make money, and they need to show here's what we did and this is what we got out of it. And so I do think the big difference between agency and in-house is you go from working on a lot of projects, touching a lot of things, growing a lot that way, and making clients happy to being in-house, owning certain projects, certain domains for longer periods of time and being solely responsible for, am I getting the results that this project or this website or channel is responsible for? So just different focuses, different time horizons. I like being in-house now because I like having longer periods of time and more resources to work on dedicated projects. Some people love the agency life and being in presentations constantly and things of that nature. I prefer to be in-house, but to each their own. If I were to lay out though going in-house to agency or agency to in-house, I certainly think starting wide with agency and then niching down into an in-house role is worked for me, and generally what you're going to find online if you look at what's the best type of career path to have.
I remember you giving me that advice back when I was in college and definitely followed it. And I can see it myself. I'm at a big agency right now at Publicis Collective, and it's honestly been insane how much I've kind of got to play a hand in. I might not be owning these deliverables or accounts, but I'm getting to play a hand in them, see how they're structured, see how things are done at scale. And that's really what you get to do at an agency, which, yeah, just kind of goes to your point of that's where you get that experience. So, kind of into the next question is, we talked a ton about SEO there, got into kind of your experience, different things about SEO, more of the talking experience, doors that can open up through doing the right things within marketing and SEO. But really want to just make this one more catered to the students or maybe young professionals who are out there that are super interested in SEO. I know I was in college and it was a super valuable skill to learn, and I still use the skills I learned today. And it's really just a great thing to know in this digital age, in my opinion. What would you say, though, Andrew, are the most valuable aspects for a student or young pro right now to master within SEO for value moving into the future?
It's interesting because there's so many aspects to SEO, right? There's content, there's the technical side of things, there's the public relations side. So there's so much to SEO. But if I had to boil down maybe some generalities across the board, one is constantly be learning and have a sense of curiosity. Google's always changing algorithms. Now you look at AI search and people group together a ChatGPT, a Perplexity, a Claude. All of them operate differently, have their own ways of running. And so if you stop learning and you just say, I found the tactics that work for me, this is what I'm going to run with, you're going to fall behind. I've seen people have 4 years of experience in SEO start running circles around people with 20 years of experience because they're more up to date with how SEO currently works. So always have that mindset of curiosity and learning. And then the other thing that I find in any professional role within digital marketing is understand how to build and read and utilize data. So a lot of people don't like numbers, and I get that. Now you can use AI to be able to pull insights in a lot of ways. But if you can build dashboards, whether it's in a Looker Studio or Google Analytics or what have you, and then be able to see traffic coming into a website, or if there's anyone out there who's interested in social media or email, same exact advice for you of be able to set things up, track performance, and then be able to take those insights and make adjustments and test new things. So no matter what your role is within digital marketing, if you can set up and read and understand and adapt to data, it's going to unlock a lot of doors. You're not sitting there waiting for insights or readouts from other people. If you can do it yourself, very, very helpful.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more on that. I see it all the time in my career path too. Even I work in search, you work in SEO, a little bit different but similar at the same time, and that still holds true. And I see in other aspects of digital marketing as well. I know you did mention AI search there and all the different LLMs that are becoming popular nowadays and kind of are becoming, something that people are living within, just like social media platforms or just like Google search. So I really wanted to pick your brain a little bit here on AI search and kind of the crazy integration and rapid upgrades we've seen of these AI tools. First, I just want to start off with what are some things that you think my generation would be happy to teach themselves right now as far as being able to use AI for providing value in the future?
Yeah, it's Pandora's box because it's so many opportunities ahead of you, but how do you make sure that it's actually productive and you're not just spending all of your time setting up workflows and doing things in AI? So I use AI a lot for efficiency building. Let's just take the content process for a website, and I can go through the various ways just within this one specific process where you could use AI to help automate things. So doing keyword research, so utilizing different tools to understand what are people actually searching for, doing some audience building research and persona research to understand who is your audience. Those types of research now can be automated with AI. writing content briefs. So what are you actually going to give a writer to write about in a brief? That can be automated. Controversial, the writing itself could be automated. I would advise against that in the current state of things because I think that's a little spammy and that humans are still important in that phase. But in theory, writing can be automated. Content editing and reviewing. You plug in AP Style book and other brand tone and guidelines and things that way, and you can automate some things. The publishing process based on the CMS might be able to be automated. When you publish, the internal links that you need to put towards a new post and what cadence do you need to refresh it, you can automate alerts and things that way. I mean, there are a lot of different steps in the content creation process, and almost all of them in some form or fashion can be automated with AI. So if I was a college student right now and I was interested in certain channels or certain industries, what I'd be considering would be what are the processes that someone would have in the role that I would want, and how could I use AI to automate that? Are there any publicly available databases, or if I worked on my own website, is there ways that I could use AI to simulate these automations and be able to build them on my own? So then when you go to an interview, you might not have the relevant internship experience or skill sets or what have you. But if you can say, hey, I took the initiative upon myself to use Claude to write code to build a tool for my personal website, this is my process and my prompting, what I did to get there. That's what I think is really valuable, especially in a very tricky job market for new professionals, is being able to actually do something yourself and create automations, because I think automations themselves are the biggest use case for AI, being able to create efficiencies. I know that that's certainly what my team is working on, is how are we using AI to be more efficient.
I mean, I know you kind of mentioned the content creation process and that being a large process. I've also personally found some success with taking a large process like that, breaking it down, and then you can use these AI tools to kind of, like you said, just automate maybe one small part of that. If you kind of start to do that and the segues of each other, you see like an exponential reduction in the amount of time you're spending on something, just because those really do add up. Even though maybe when you're working on the one small automation, it might not seem like something crazy. I think college students should be focusing on as well. Now, with this big integration of AI, and especially in our industries in SEO and paid search, you're seeing it a ton. It's really what's talked about. There's maybe a lot of fear around it. I know people like myself are super excited to see more integration and more tools and opportunities that are going to come. But at the same time, there's kind of the old guard that has been doing this marketing thing for a long time and has seen a lot of tools come and go. They've seen the rise of social media, lots of different things. And a lot of people don't want this to phase them and might see AI as something that isn't something we should have this focus on to be using or telling young people to use. So what's really one way to get back to the roots of this show and really the purpose that I want it to have is how can we really bridge the gap between one, how my generation can kind of maybe educate the old guard that's been doing this for so long. At the same time, just how can we kind of work together to achieve and be able to, just keep moving forward in this crazy world today, not fall behind.
Yeah, showing proof. I think that's the biggest way, getting results. It's difficult, especially me being in house and the results really having to speak for themselves in the channels. If you can actually run a project and use automations with AI and then be able to say, I saved X amount of time or brought in X amount of business or created capacity to do this other project because I used AI, I think being able to prove it out and document it is certainly helpful. And then showing a sustained pattern of that behavior can certainly help. What I'd also say is that if people aren't using AI internally at companies to automate various processes or use it to build prototypes or what have you, they're falling behind. It might be, to use your verbiage, the old guard's responsibility not to fall behind in some ways. I do think the human element and experience does play a role in some things, but if AI can get you 80% the way there, and then a human can get you the last 20%, if you think about those splits, if younger generation is able to understand prompt engineering and how to automate things or write code or automate data insights and what have you and get things 80% the way there, that's a very big chunk of projects and what have you. What I'd also say though is it's not necessarily just a generational thing. I've seen young people say, "Ah, this is ruining things," and my friends are using this for their online modules and stuff for school, and you're not actually learning and retaining information. And I don't use it. I still handwrite notes. And then, if we take things back 20 years, my grandma was the first person I know who had a laptop and Facebook and different things. I had a very technologically forward grandparent. And so it's not necessarily just generational. What I'd say is it's more of a skill set and a mindset thing. And I think a lot of companies right now, if you're not using AI and that's not one of your goals of how do I implement this to create efficiencies, you're going to fall behind. Like it's something that, especially in the job interview space, I assume more and more people are going to ask, how have you used AI? Share data of what you've been able to create or save time. And so it's just going to be a prerequisite in the very near future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And, maybe that is a little bit better way to look at it that, maybe just the lack of education is the reason a lot of people maybe aren't open to using it or open to learning more. So maybe, as people who do kind of understand and maybe taking that responsibility to educate others, maybe something that I kind of look to do more moving forward. But we've talked quite a bit about AI now, and just kind of wanted to round out this little AI segment on you get to work in the SEO space and you're working for a company that obviously has very high standards and is going to be one of the people leading the pack, I think, in this industry, especially when you talk about AI integration into their paid search, paid social, SEO programs, if you will. So what do you think that AI implementation and success is going to look like across search and SEO moving forward in the future, whether it be 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? What does that look like for you, Andrew?
Yeah, it's difficult. That one kind of stumps me a bit because there's so many different use cases and there's so many different teams that I touch that trying to make a prediction about what that is going to look like is certainly difficult. I think what we're going to see more of are consolidated data teams and research teams that use AI to be able to take insights and feed them to channel specific teams to be able to say, these are the things you should focus on and why. So rather than, hey, I'm an SEO, I look at a website, these are the things that I should do. I think AI is going to really be able to say, hey, these are the things you should focus on. I've also seen somebody take a screenshot of it was either a SEMrush or an Ahrefs technical report and use AI to be able to feed that into their Jira ticket system where they work with engineers and it pre-built some of the tickets to be able to work on. And so I still think that the way that SEOs work will be similar. I just think it's going to be more efficient. Now, as far as what is AI implementation going to look like in search itself, thinking about like a Google AI overviews or a Gemini or a ChatGPT or what have you, it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly it scales. I do think and have seen in the data how much traffic to various sites. I have access from various freelance clients' own websites I work on, my personal site, a whole bunch of different things, so several dozens, and have seen a general trend that informational, like blog type of things, have gone down a lot in the last 6 months to 18 months, depending on the site and the industry, because of people doing more top of funnel searches using AI. So going to a chat GPT for that type of research or searching something in Google and seeing the AI overview and then not going past that. So as far as what we're going to see in the search experience, I think AI is sort of here to stay because people are able to get information right away rather than having to jump around to a bunch of different sites. But I know what you're curious about, I'm sure, being on your side, is that all of these different platforms have to make money. And so you hear about ChatGPT all of a sudden starting to monetize. Claude's Super Bowl commercial was kind of a spoof on that of like, we're not going to have ads. Use us because we're not going to be like everyone else. Well, how are they going to make money long term? You look at Google, they've always found ways to run ads, scale their ads, implement them into things. And so when we think about what search is going to look like in the future, I think we're going to start in the next few months seeing more monetization, more ads appearing within these types of platforms. As far as scale, how soon does it happen? Who knows? I still see a lot of searches of people be like, I don't want AI. You could actually do a Google search and then do a space and then do minus AI, and it'll take the Google AI overviews out of it because Google got so much feedback that people didn't want to see AI within their search. So I still think we're at this somewhat early adoption phase where people don't like knowing and seeing things that are AI. You look at the worst Super Bowl commercials and ad meter, and it's like AI.com and a lot of the AI specific commercials that were out there. So it's funny because businesses really like to use AI for efficiencies. Users don't tend to like AI or things that say AI or what they know use AI. So it's a really interesting dichotomy right now of how AI is looked at and treated in the world.
It is such an interesting dichotomy out there. I would totally agree with you there. Like, for example, you look at all the AI ads that were killer and did great in the Super Bowl, and then you have an AI ad like Svedka, who puts something out there that just really doesn't hit with their audience and is kind of a reach for a liquor company. And all I've seen is negative feedback about that. It was on the ad weeks, one of their least ranked Super Bowl ads, that kind of thing. So, really understanding how people look at your brand and how people look at AI is going to be another major player here, in my opinion. But that kind of rounds out a lot of the more long form questions I had for you, Andrew. That was some awesome advice and some great stuff that you were able to share. I just kind of want to move into our last segment here, which is going to be a little bit more rapid fire style, a little shorter form questions. I'm sure you'll have some shorter form answers for us, but really just looking to provide as much value as possible and really just leave our audience here with some really nice actionable insights to kind of go and take with them in these next couple of weeks. I know a lot of our younger pros or maybe students who are getting ready to graduate are getting ready to kind of embark on that first job hunt. So hopefully this will kind of provide some help for that. But to kind of get started here, I know you and I both have side project and freelance experience. I did quite a bit in college, so did you. You kind of actually put me on to the freelance game and how valuable it can be for one, getting some extra money in your pocket, and two, you can kind of package that freelance experience up as really good high level experience, especially when you might not have some if you weren't able to land those internships. I know I was in a similar position and didn't have the greatest internship experience, but when you can talk about being able to talk with a client and help them achieve real business goals, like you mentioned, that goes a long ways in an interview. So one thing I just want to ask is, what would you recommend to young pros and students for how to add freelance clients and actually get them and get their business, as well as how to package that experience for success moving forward?
Yeah, one, I would say do your role really well with what you do have. So for me, most of my freelance clients have been from personal connections who just see me as the SEO person in their life. So I'm around SEOs all the time, but I have friends, I have family who are just like, oh, Andrew loves SEO and he talks about it all the time. If I have SEO needs, I should go to Andrew. So being known to your friends and family as the person who does something specific can certainly help. I got one of my biggest freelance clients from Twitter because someone made a post that said, hey, I'm looking for someone to help me with SEO. Does anybody know someone out there? And then I got tagged and the person DM'd me, and then I had them as retainer clients for a couple of years. So one, if you can create a bit of a niche for yourself where people see you as something specific, that can certainly be helpful. I know people who go full time freelance, they like to niche down even further. So I'm a local law firm SEO, or I am a technical enterprise website SEO, right? So it's a lot easier to get freelance clients when people look at you as the best of the best of what you do. But I know that your question was about starting off early and getting freelance clients. I would say the easiest thing to do is reach out to a nonprofit or a local mom and pop shop and just say, hey, literally for free, give me access to your website or your analytics platform or what have you, and let me do some work for you to build up my portfolio. So then I can pitch other potential freelance clients and give them a case study.
just being able to build some social proof is really all you need to kind of kick off those freelance clients. I know once I built my first website and got that rolling and was able to say, hey, I was able to drive traffic here and provide these outcomes, the freelance clients do kind of start lining up once they realize, there's a lot of these small and medium business owners out there who are desperate for help and are, waist deep in so many different tasks. The last thing they can even think about is their digital marketing. So a lot of value there. And I think a lot of people just sleep on that opportunity. So definitely take that advice and run with it to anybody out there that is a student right now, especially if you have some free time and feel a little bit bored. Great way to fill some free time and make some extra money. But moving forward, though, what would you say? We kind of totally pivoting here away from the freelance stuff, but this is going to be really relevant to what I was just mentioning about students who are kind of embarking on their first job hunt, or maybe people who are even young in their career and are looking for their second role. You're up as a senior manager right now, so you're dealing with building a team, I'm sure. You're seeing interviews. What would you say for the younger generation right now is the best way to stand out in the interview process, especially for a large company like Rocket?
Yeah, it's all of the little things that add up. So, when people say do your research, meaning bring up the people's LinkedIn, see where they went to school, see what experiences they had. Do they have any recent posts or projects or anything that they've worked on that you could bring up in the interview? Or sending a note after, whether it's a handwritten note or whether it's just a LinkedIn message or an email. All of those little things add up. And especially with how many people are applying for jobs right now, those can be tie-breaking items. So don't overlook the little things. And then as far as how to stand out specifically within the interview, the other thing I'd say is use numbers if you can. So if you can say, I had this internship and I helped this company drive $1,000 of business in a month because I ran this campaign, or I ran social media here and we raised followers by 15%. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be gigantic, impressive numbers, but using the STAR method, meaning what is the situation that you were in? What was your specific task? What action did you take? And then what result came out of that? And that result having numbers tied to it is certainly helpful. As someone trying to start earlier in their career too, that are the result, using numbers is great. What did you learn? Or what would you have done differently? I think that's the biggest thing when people are starting out. The biggest skill they can have, like I touched on earlier, is that curiosity, the willingness to learn. So if in an interview you say, I did this project, I had this success, but this is what I would have done differently, or this is what I learned from it, and then I applied it later on in a different project, to be able to show that willingness to learn and adapt and grow, that is a huge skill starting off. That if you can just add that one little thing at the end of questions and interviews of what did you learn or how did you apply this win or growth opportunity to other things, that could certainly stand out in interviews.
Some really great tips. Moving on, I know you're really big on building your personal brand. You kind of actually put me on game to building a LinkedIn and kind of inserting myself into some different communities, meeting new people, and it kind of just turned into a whole trail of what eventually led to me doing this podcast. And now kind of here we are in our full circle moment. But what would you say for students, young pros who might be hearing this and saying, I don't even know the first step to take to build my personal brand? I'm actually really scared to put any kind of posts online or anything like that. What is like 2 to 3 tips that you would give, just something simple for really kicking off and starting the build out of your personal brand?
Yeah, I'd say just post. Uh, doesn't matter if you get 1 like, 2 likes, no likes. I had a conversation the other day with a senior vice president, and I had only talked to him for maybe 10 minutes prior in my life. And he goes, hey, I see your SEO posts on LinkedIn, and we're hiring for a certain role on the team. I'm curious if you have anyone off the top of your head or anyone that I should get to know about that position. He is on a different team on Rocket than what I tend to interface with. He's a senior VP, not someone that I thought had really interacted with any of my content previously, but he knows, hey, I've seen your content on LinkedIn. I've also seen our data science team came into the office one time and someone introduced me to someone else and said, hey, this is the guy who posts about SEO on LinkedIn. So it's funny because I don't necessarily see myself that way. I don't schedule my posts on LinkedIn. I don't give it much thought. I am doing stuff during the day or I see an algorithm update or something and I just slap something up quickly on LinkedIn, I'm not giving it much of any thought. And people still see me as that guy who posts about SEO things on LinkedIn. And so you don't know what others are seeing. The metrics of, oh, I'm posting things on an Instagram or a YouTube channel or on LinkedIn. Sometimes those vanity metrics aren't really the things that stand out if you can be consistent about things so that people start seeing you in a certain light. And again, that would help you potentially get freelance clients too. I've been recruited for jobs. I've been asked to speak at conferences or on webinars or what have you from people that I don't know because I just throw some things up about SEO on LinkedIn once in a while. So as far as building a personal brand, just start. Like start building a history of things, start getting your name out there, start finding out what your niche is, what you care about, what you like to do. And not 100% of your posts have to be about your job or the industry. It can be about you. My colleagues wrapped my desk in wrapping paper when I came home from dog sitting in Hawaii. That's a whole other story. But being able to feel like you're relating to the person themselves and then being able to tie them and their personality to the industry they're in or the skill sets that they have, I think that's starting to build your personal brand. Your personal brand is not just your professional brand, it is your personal brand. Who are you? And then what skills do you bring to the table?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's just such a big difference in like I'm looking at your personal brand as an example, how everyone does SEO, and then there's clearly a very unique way that Andrew Prince does SEO, and you've made that very clear across a lot of different platforms. And I think that's kind of the takeaway you should have is just how do you do what you're good at? Not just what do you do, how do you do it, and what makes that special? You know, that's where you really start to get into providing real value and setting yourself apart from maybe the rest of the pack. To kind of round out our rapid fire questions here, this will be a fun one. I just want to get one hot take you have for the SEO and search world going into 2026 here.
Yeah, pump the brakes on LLMs and AI search as far as being main traffic drivers. So I believe a lot of people think Google's AI mode will overtake traditional like Google interface by the end of 2026. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's a lot of testing Google still has to do. They still have to figure out how to monetize things. They would frustrate a lot of people by only giving an AI solution and not the typical links that they've come to expect for the last 29 years. And from a business impact perspective, I believe a lot of companies have been investing a lot into these newer channels and maybe not seeing the business impact. Again, businesses are out here to make money, not just get impressions and clicks. And so if I think about what these LLMs need to do to be able to scale at certain usage to be able to get businesses to continue to invest in them as large channels. I don't see that happening in 2026. And then I think about my mom and dad and I think about what would it take for them to be using ChatGPT instead of Google or a Gemini or what have you. My dad thinks that Google business profiles are websites still. Getting people to download these apps and then completely change their behaviors, I still don't see that happening by the end of 2026 as far as widespread adoption of things.
Yeah, that's a great hot take. I mean, when you really think about it, there's a lot more than just the people who are getting super hyped about AI on social media, which is a lot of what you see in the mainstream. There is, but honestly, I would say the majority of people still out there that really don't even care about AI, and it's probably not even popping up in their feed. So yeah, just something to think about and something to really keep in mind as you move forward and start to make your plans for 2026. But yeah, just kind of wanted to jump into the conclusion here now. First, thank you so much for taking the time to come and do the show with me, Andrew. There was so many great takeaways and insights, and really just want to let you know how much I appreciate your time here. I know you're a super busy guy, so thanks again, and it was a great conversation. I did have a quick closer question for you, though. This is something I like to ask to all the pros that I talk to. When I was doing one-on-one coffee chats in college, this was always the one I closed out on, and really provided me with some great advice that I was able to use, and is one of the reasons I think I was able to have such great insights going into my job search and even going into my first role. But if you could go back to the days where you were sitting in that college class as a graduating senior, you were just fresh graduated and really starting to apply to jobs and hungry to just get in the industry and get things going, what would you say is the number one thing you would have done differently, and how would you have done it differently?
Yeah, the easiest answer to that is get relevant internships. It was difficult because I transferred schools and then had four different majors, so my career path or school path made that a little difficult, but nothing replaces real hands-on experience. The more that you can gain, the better. And what I like to say to young professionals is that it's not about necessarily finding what you want to do from the get-go. A lot of times it's about what don't you want to do and crossing that off the list and getting closer to the things that you do want to do. Internships certainly help you there. But if you're someone like me who, jumped around as far as majors and it made it difficult to figure out things that way, I would say I'm actually going to bring up your first LinkedIn message that you sent me, Broxton, because if I could do something different outside of internships, it is exactly what you messaged me. So I spoke in your class at Michigan State. I had a line after class of students looking to talk to me. You're not one of those. You decided to DM me on LinkedIn and you said, "Hi, Andrew. I was one of the students in the lecture you presented in last Friday at Michigan State." So the context, I knew immediately how you knew me. I'm very interested in the work you do and have even been able to work with SEO in a startup myself. Great. So you can relate and you have a baseline knowledge. I would love to get the opportunity to ask you some more questions about your professional path and pick your brain about SEO and website availability. So, very clear about what you were trying to learn. And then he said, "Do you have any availability this week to have a quick chat via phone call or Zoom?" So, it was here's the context. This is how I relate to you. This is what I'm interested in learning and growing from. And this is my expectation, my ask of you. Some crazy message. I get quite a few of these, and you've even sent people my way, which I love. And then Matthew Jones at Michigan State had someone reach out to me the other day who's a student at State because he knows that I'm willing to talk to students. There are a lot of professionals who are willing to help students or young professionals navigate and understand things in the world. I appreciate that you've created this podcast to be able to make it so that maybe it's less scary to reach out to people. So I encourage if this episode has resonated with anyone in your audience, Broxton, like send a similar message to me. I don't tend to say no to people who are hungry to learn more and wanting to grow in their careers. So, it's almost been a year and a half of knowing you, seeing your growth and your willingness to learn from other professionals and maybe their mistakes. You haven't modeled your career path or the way that you do things off of others. You found what works for you. And so I've really admired that. And, I've been doing this for 8 years. You've been doing it for what, like a year or what have you. As far as your professional career, I have a lot to learn from you. I have a lot to grow from. So it's a mutually beneficial thing. Your first ask was, what could I learn? And now I'm learning a lot of things from you, which I certainly appreciate.
100%. Super honored to hear you say that, honestly, Andrew. I don't look at myself as somebody who's teaching, especially these professionals that I interview and talk with, but it's always great to hear that and know that I'm providing some value on my end too. And those are some great insights and really just goes to show, all it takes is a simple message to kick off a relationship like this that can really, we're now a year and a half in and have helped each other out in multiple different ways. I've even given you like a random call in the evening to say, hey, how do I do these website redirects? And you were able to walk me through it. So, that kind of stuff is extremely valuable, and you're just not going to find that in your day to day anywhere else. One piece of advice I'll leave you guys with is just like Andrew said, if you're somebody who this resonates with, send a similar message. A lot of the professionals out there are just like Andrew, especially if it's an alumni from your college or there's just something you can relate to them on. Like with Andrew, for example, I was able to talk about SEO a little bit. But these professionals want to help us. They want to help us break into our careers. They were in the same shoes not long ago and understand just how hard it is and really are the only ones who do. Your parents, your friends, you might want to talk to them, but they really are the ones who don't get it. These people who have been here, done it, and are in the trenches still doing it every day are the ones who know. And, it might be a little bit scary, but one, this podcast should help. And two, just like Andrew kind of said earlier, start posting, send the message. It's that simple. And you'll be a year and a half in recording a podcast looking back like I'm so glad I did that. But yeah, so we'll just kind of close out there. That was the last question I had for you, Andrew. Again, thank you so much for being here and making the time for this. If you guys are interested in what Andrew had to say or want to learn more and kind of just follow along with Andrew, you can follow him on LinkedIn. Just Andrew Prince. He posts a lot of SEO and AI search tips, tricks, helpful information with new stuff that's happening. So I would definitely recommend following him there and following along. If you ever need anything SEO, hit him up as well. That kind of wraps the episode, Andrew. Thank you again, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Go green.
Go White.